Hello. So I guess now I'm kind of making this little series this is not relevant to you, subject of this letter that is spoken and not drafted. Subject being Luca Guadagnino. This isn't really relevant to you yet, but I guess I'm making it a series, kind of, when I feel inspired or whatever, to do this. And I do. Right now. And we'll see, I'll get into that. But basically, I'm kind of just making these kind of long messages of, compiled thoughts. A lot of them, it's, over a while I've been thinking about, but then it's kind of, I just feel like kind of synthesizing it now and regurgitating it in a more, kind of organized but also pretty random, not really organized, to be honest, because it's, unwritten and everything, but I still feel nice, feeling, honest about how I'm presenting my ideas, I guess. And for some context, I just watched, it's, Friday the 13th, December 13th, my birthday's tomorrow, December 14th, and I was just, bored, and I, decided to go watch your new movie, Queer, in theaters, and basically really, prompted a lot of thought for me, and I really liked many things about it. I'll get into this, because it fits really interestingly into my previous kind of construction of my understanding of your movies, which is pretty personal. I don't think it's the general, message, but I still really liked my interpretation. I was able to actually agree on a lot of it with my sister, and she's not afraid to disagree with me, so I felt like it was really interesting to have that conversation, because she really enjoys your movies too. But I'm going to kind of start with, actually I'm going to go kind of chronologically in the movies that I talk about, at least. But this all came to me after seeing your 4 previous films, this idea. I had this kind of way that I was understanding all 4 of them to work together as this kind of zodiac wheel, where a key character, actually 3 key characters in each, represented the 3 fire signs, the 3 water signs, the 3 air signs, the 3 earth signs. And I basically came to that understanding after thinking about how each of these 4 films before Queer had this really elemental, I could attach them to a specific element, is kind of what I mean. So I'll kind of break that down, because then it was really interesting how I felt Queer plays into that, in a way that I didn't know would be possible, because I thought it might be done after, the 12 zodiac signs were over. But there is a 13th. Anyways, we'll get into this. Crazy that it's Friday the 13th, actually. I didn't even think about that. And I am associating this new movie with the 13th zodiac sign. But anyways, we'll get into that. I've also been in my car, and it's been on for 13 minutes. I just saw on my monitor, so that's pretty cool, random. I don't know why. Anyways, let me just get into it. So, what's really cool to me about this interpretation is that it honestly makes sense to me, and even when I was telling my sister, it makes sense to her, and either way it feels an interesting, I don't know how intentional this would be, this is a really long-term pattern that I saw, but it was still really cool to me. So kind of starting with Call Me By Your Name, to go chronologically, that movie felt just a lot of water sign energy. Oh, and the way that I go through these signs with the chronological order of the movies is backwards of the zodiac wheel, which is interesting, but that's kind of random. I don't know if that's anyways, but to start with the water sign movie, to me, Call Me By Your Name, I feel there's just a lot of emotion, and really the sphere that you're in when you're watching that movie is an emotional one. That's kind of what it marks you with. A lot of even the beauty of it is emotionally kind of melancholic. Just emotionally charged thing. And I think even the beauty of these places in Italy and such have kind of this romantic nostalgia. There's an emotional side to everything that happens in that movie. And to go through the characters, I really thought Elio was a really interesting manifestation, I guess, of kind of the Pisces idea, where I saw a lot of when I think of Pisces, I think of this person that wants to attach to someone else, even if it slows them down a little bit in their process, like those two fish that are tied by a string. Like, even if it slows them down, at least they get to feel each other's presence and know. I think the idea of the Pisces myth is they're, like, escaping from something, and that's why they attach to each other, is to be sure that they both get out. And I think that's kind of interesting in, like, Elio's context, where it's like, you know, whether or not his relationship sped up his coming of age, quote unquote, it was something that felt worth it, and out of his nature, he wanted to experience the presence of someone else, like, kind of close to him in that emotional sphere. Very Pisces to me. And then Oliver, of course, not of course at all, but in a way that makes sense to me, is really kind of Scorpio-ish. I think of the myth of, like, I think it's, what's his name? The myth, it's like an old Greek guy. He made a myth, or not a myth at all. It's like a parable. The name might come back to me. I can't remember. It says like an O or something. But made basically this story, this very, like, kind of fundamental archetypal story. I'm literally going to look it up. It's like a story of a scorpion and a frog. I'm almost there. Okay, I'm angry. I was very wrong. I guess it's not by an old Greek person. Oh, no, it's Aesop. Aesop. That's what I thought. Kind of. Maybe I'm wrong. Okay. But kind of like the way that I see it, it's the farmer and the viper in Aesop. Interesting. But the way they see it in that story is like the scorpion asks the frog to help it cross the bridge. The frog helps, but then the scorpion stings it. They're drowning. The frog's like, what the hell? And the scorpion's like, it's in my nature. And I kind of see that connected to how, and like even the scorpion's the most detached from the water itself of the water signs. I think there's this detachment with Oliver that makes him kind of cruel in ways that aren't really conventional and are hard to acknowledge as such. And it's kind of like a poison in that way. To think about the stinger, where it's like you have to understand a lot about the capacities, the nature, and like the literal biology, and you can think of that spiritually, of the scorpion, to know that when it hurt you, what came after is because of the scorpion wound, you know? Very interesting stuff. And then Marcia was actually my third most important in that movie, and I was associated a lot with Meet with the Cancer, which I think is associated with kind of like this this soft side, you know. And I saw a lot of how she interacted with Elio as being really understanding in a way that maybe is kind of the nature. Like the Cancer, there's kind of like the attachment to the moon, and like I think of like mirrors, and like kind of just this way he felt seen by Marcia, like no one else kind of saw him. Makes me think of these like mirror images in the Cancer moon kind of connection, and just like that whole idea of someone emotionally being able to be there in that space with you because they're there with you, like they're matching that, they're mirroring you in that moment and understanding you in a way that you wouldn't maybe expect. I don't know. That's really cool. Next, go to Suspiria. I was really marked by Suspiria. I want merch. I won't really talk about that too much, but Suspiria to me was really really air energy. Oh, and all of these, there's like obviously to me a really interesting queer side to it that's on like the underbelly, but like a really huge part of the story. I think in the first one it's really obvious in Call Me by Your Name. In this one, I'm not a girl, I'm not a queer girl, but I feel like this is what like kind of like coming of age as a queer kind of woman maybe a little bit feels like. A little bit. And just like a lot of the unspokenness of the intimacy between people felt like this maybe queer woman dynamic I'm not sure about that one. But to get into the zodiac sign stuff, because the air signs are Aquarius, Libra, and Gemini. And I really thought that the main character, her name escapes me, Susie? Yeah, Susie, to me, felt very Aquarius in the way that she had this spark in her, this connection to something that changed everything, and just kind of like bringing that new. I think Aquarius has this kind of like sometimes sinister, because it's all Saturn based or whatever, Saturn ruled, but I think it has this kind of connection to, I don't know, people that are maybe not expected to be in a position where they have connection to power and all these things, being in that position. Like, I think the water bearer itself, it's like a human who gets to be on Olympus because he's like attractive or whatever to the gods, but it's kind of like, I don't know, just that similar idea. But then it's like, because of that, maybe there's a new power. I think there's just a connection to just like underdog-ish nature, and like a connection to other power, like in a groundbreaking way that's kind of seen in, I think, in Aquarius, that I saw in Susie, To look at the Libra, I thought that was really, what's her name? Wow, I should have remembered their names better before doing this. But Tilda Swinton's character, who I'm currently finding the name of, Mother Blanc. Madame Blanc, actually. Let me call her that. She had a really Libra energy in the way that, me personally, this is why these things are kind of personal too. My mom's a Libra, so that kind of impacted this. But Libra is attached with like Venus, and so there's a little bit of like, there's a lot of, Venus is like the woman, quote unquote, and like, but just in general, I think of there's kind of being like this, in the balance that it holds, like in the kind of connection to the good and the bad that we see in a Libra and in Madame Blanc. I think there's like a maturity and kind of like, maybe outside of my even experience having a Libra mom, kind of like a motherly, like a mom of the friend group type of vibe. But even just in this movie, it's a lot more deep than that. I think there's a lot of judgment made by Madame Blanc, decisions that are kind of like in the name of justice and truth, in a way that like maybe resonates with Libra energy, I think. And the Gemini, which I thought was really interesting, is really exemplified by Mia Goth to me, because of this way that she was really again, in a really unspoken way, just understanding of Susie, and just really there for her, and like consistently gave this kind of sisterhood that was really I think made their relationship feel really intimate and real. And even the way they like, do these little tricks together kind of around the dance academy and just all these things, it felt very evocative of the idea I feel like Gemini has of like, we're in this together, and validating you in a way that kind of comes with like being there in that experience with you. But so I just kind of thought that really played well into their dynamics and really made sense to me, and I thought that was just cool after like having already thought about I don't know exactly the order in which these came to me, but this all was really interesting for me to think about. But moving on to what's the name? To Bones and all. So this is like literally one of my favorite movies, if not my favorite movie of all time. I tell like everybody this. I like make a lot of people watch it. I'm a huge fan. I love everything in that movie, to be honest. And I thought that had a really earth sign energy with the way that even the act of eating someone is kind of like being really in this earth element of matter being kind of recycled, and matter holding meaning and memories and value, and that being kind of like acknowledged in the most crude way by having people like disregard it by eating people, but not really like actually disregarding that still, and still having acknowledgement for the, you know, the meaning of our connection as souls to matter is really cool, and really makes this earth and energy click with it to me. To start, actually, I kind of not with the main character this time. I thought the dad had a lot of Taurus energy, and this is another time where I'm biased because I have a dad who's a Taurus. But I felt like there was a huge connection between the way that he was kind of like laboring over those years to keep her secret and like her crimes literally safe and private. Sorry. Reminds you a lot of the way that the Taurus kind of exemplifies this chosen kind of work, and the way that they get things done and like really, you know, get what they want sometimes in my eyes because of their work. And I think that's the Taurus concept, kind of like you can work for anything, and like, you know, I don't know, I think of like the bowl and the Taurus stuff as like being, you know, getting the job done. I don't know, and, acquiring the resources, setting them in place and stuff. And I think that's kind of like what his role as a father kind of felt like to me. But then I thought Timothy Chalamet's character had a really interesting kind of like Virgo energy to me, where ultimately he was better off kind of alone. He was doing things better by himself, and even kind of in that solitude, he was able to provide a lot for people around him. I think that's kind of the Virgo energy, is like the virgin, like having a baby is like she could just do something beautiful and perfect on her own. Like it doesn't need to involve anyone else. And it's like he kind of would have been safer even in that movie, Lee, if he had just stayed alone. Because this brings me to the last zodiac sign that's an earth sign that I think is really exemplified by Marin, which is the Capricorn. And just the connection to Saturn and that earth part of Saturn, and the way that she eats Lee. Presumably even the bad guy, you know, the bad guy. I forget his name, he's really freaky. But I think it's implied that she eats him too. Heavily, actually. She ate his heart, like on cam, almost. So, I think it's heavily implied. Sully. Ugh. Devastating creature. I'm joking, but like literally. And I have a lot of thoughts as to how that movie has a really interesting unspoken connection to like the way queer people navigate kind of the world, and especially a more violent world towards them. But also to kind of finish what I was saying about Marin, I think it's really interesting with that Saturn connection and the way Saturn like ate his kids, and like Saturn representing time, you know, people in time dying and being buried into the earth. I think the act of kind of like cannibalism in like an earth, Saturnian, earthen perspective is really reminds me of just how the earth will eat you again one day. You know, it'll just like consume you when you're buried. And I think of like the act of her eating Lee felt kind of like a burial, you know, like a funeral, right? And you know, then he's buried within her is kind of the situation. And even just her being the last one, like standing that test of time, I think it really felt really Capricorn energy to me. So yeah, that's those. And then for challengers, I thought there was very fire sign energy, just in the way passion kind of drives everything. And also just in the way that the dynamics are so dynamic, honestly. So fast-paced. So even though, you know, not a lot happens time-wise, chronologically, when things are happening, a lot is happening at once. But in that movie, like, to start with Zendaya, I thought that was just like the Leo, you know, like you just kind of have to acknowledge them when they're there, you know, Leo being kind of like the sun zodiac sign. It's like when the sun's out, you can't see any other stars. You can't even see the moon usually, you know. But like that to me is really like Zendaya's energy as a Leo in that movie. Like, you know, when she's there, she's the star of the show. At least, you know, pre-injury. And I think that's part of what really affects her is in her nature. There is that celebration and recognition. That's like a part of what she needs. That's really interesting to me. And then, like, art is really Aries to me. It's funny, those names kind of have a connection. But there's kind of a lot of, just like, how do I put this? Combative energy in Aries. A lot of, like, you know, butting heads, you know, is kind of the image I think people have when they think of that zodiac sign and, like, the, what's it called? The Rams. But, I think I see that with art to me. I have a really personal interpretation that he's like the villain kind of in that movie, and that he drives all of the conflict really, because of his nature and his nature to be like competitive, but in this way where he feels like competitive in a way where he feels like he's doing everything kind of right. So competitive in a way that's kind of, how do I put this? It is kind of by his own rules. There's kind of like in the ways that he is assertive, it's by setting in place these structures that, that decide how the conflict will be engaged. And maybe that is kind of like Aries energy to me, which is interesting. And then Patrick is just a really cool classic Sagittarius, just like me, you know, quote unquote. Not quote unquote, like literally. But no, actually quote unquote. We'll talk about that later. But really cool Sagittarius like me, because I just feel like there's a lot of that energy of like, no, like I'm trying to see and think deep, and like push my vision far, you know. And even just kind of think outside of myself about, like, these greater ideals and stuff. I don't know, I kind of think that's Sagittarius energy, and, like, the way it's like an archer that shoots, like, the arrow. It's like your intention flies where you want it to. And still being, like, a fire sign, still having that dynamic kind of action, kind of. I sound weird now that I'm a Sagittarius, but I kind of see that in him, and, like, how he had this goal, this ideal for him, and, art and Zendaya. Why am I saying Zendaya? See, that's terrible. I feel like that. I think that's like highly unprofessional and inappropriate. That I would call Zendaya in that movie. Now Tashi Duncan, okay. You know, I think that made me lose my train of thought. I'm sorry. I just felt bad that I think I was a little disrespectful calling Zendaya, like, you know. But anyways, getting back to it, I love how all of their relationships felt so uniquely, like there was so much going on when they were together. It was really like exponential how much kind of the dynamicism felt exponentially increasing, where like the more they were together, the more would happen, which is really cool. Really cool fire sign stuff to me. But now, this is where it gets complicated, right? Because it's like, okay, there's all these zodiac signs. How would this new movie connect? But this is where it was really insane to me to think about in this 13th situation, with it being like the 13th day of December, and it's Friday the 13th, so, you know, spooky connection too. But there is a 13th zodiac sign, and it's like Ophiuchus. And what's really cool is it's like it's connected with the snake, like a man holding a snake. And I just like I do love that in that movie there is kind of like a notable snake. There is that kind of like Ouroboros infinity sign snake, which I think was just, I love the mystical images in this one. I think it's really interesting that we see the spirit in this movie in a way that we don't in any of the other ones, in that way that he would yearn, and we would see this kind of ghost hand extend towards Drew Starkey's character. Sorry, I'm talking about whoa, is his name Lee again? I think it is. Sorry, that's messing me up. Yeah, sorry. No, yeah. When I look at Lee's kind of like spiritual extending hands towards Eugene in Queer, it made me feel really like really interesting about. I made me think about how this is the first time we actually see the spirit, and think specifically about the connection or disconnection of the spirit to the body. And I love that was explored so much with like the way he wants to explore telepathy. I thought that was just like, it made me feel so satisfied that I was already starting to have this interpretation. And even if I had to think of a fifth element, I think it would be kind of like, spirit. Like, what's that other thing that exists that's, a part of this world, is like the essence of people and spirit. And I think even in this movie being called Queer and just being about queer people, it is kind of interesting when you look at how like this is and I thought it was a really amazing depiction of how all these things carry through, and just like the characterization is amazing, especially with these being like straight people. I'm pretty sure I'm like, these are amazing actors doing amazing jobs at creating characters that were conceptualized by amazing people and like under the direction of an amazing person. Like, I'm really praising this. I really liked it. I really enjoyed. I think there was kind of this ambiguity and this confusing aspect where the story isn't as like concise as the other ones in some ways, and not like in Challengers where it's like, okay, well, literally what happened at the end, or in Call Me by Your Name where it's like, oh, does something else happen? Or in Suspiria where it's like, okay, how does this get really like integrated for real into the real world? Like, what happens next kind of. This one, it really just feels like the entire time there's this blur. Like, we're trying to see deeper because that's what they feel like they're doing. And that's what I've always, my friend said, to quote Amelia on this, because I thought this was hilarious. This is amazing. She said they should stop calling it coming out or whatever when people come out or something. This is not a direct quote. Something along the lines of they should call coming out a spiritual awakening. And I thought that really ties into this movie in a way where it's like this experience that they're doing isn't purely driven by this like sexual animalistic thing. There's a really deep spiritual component. By the way, I am an Ophiuchus, if it exists, I believe. Wait. Yeah, I'm an Ophiuchus. So that was really crazy to me, thinking about it in that context. But it's just really cool to me. I see the way that they connect with each other as being really driven by a spiritual side, and even the way they take ayahuasca together and all this, and even the way Drew Starkey's character, Eugene, let me not call them by their actors too much. I feel like that's rude. But Eugene like leaves him and doesn't come back and all this stuff. It reminds me of just like so many aspects of just like coming of age, and just like these people being milestones and still, bringing so much value to people that are just there to be milestones along your journey as the younger person. But still having that intimacy, that depth, and learning so much together. It's not about being a mentor, being a mentored person. That's like a structure that was existed outside. Like, we're all kind of these like children and these babies. But it was so beautiful seeing the intimacy, and like it felt really cool to see, in my eyes, how this really agreed with the idea I had with the four other ones. And just like, to me, the Ophiuchus is Lee, and I think there's an interesting connection between Ophiuchus also and like medicine. And Lee obviously having his addiction problems felt really cool with that, and just everything about it. And I might go more in depth on this movie in a later time, but like I just wanted to talk about this and I really love your work, and I hope you enjoy hearing this.